Old man, don't you dare come here. I don't need you. Just go die alone. That was the text message I received from my son on the night of December 22nd. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water, splashing straight into the face of an old father who had been standing in his kitchen, carefully packing Christmas gifts from the ranch. My phone vibrated softly in my hand, but the room felt suddenly hollow, as if the air had been sucked out. A neighbor walked past the window, noticed me frozen there, and shook his head with quiet sympathy. "Let it go, William," he said. "Kids grow up. They forget. That's life." But I didn't believe him. Not for a second. Matthew Carter was not that kind of son. He never had been. This was the boy who once cried uncontrollably when he saw me cut my hand fixing a fence. The boy who stood at his mother's grave gripping my arm, swearing that this Christmas he would roast a brisket with his own hands and make me proud. That promise had kept me alive through 6 long, lonely months. Matthew was a man of his word. He valued it more than money. In over 30 years of being his father, I had never known him to break a promise, not even a small one. So when I read that message, I didn't feel angry. I felt afraid. Not a clear, logical fear, something deeper, primal. The kind that creeps up your spine before your mind can explain it. The kind you smell before you see, like smoke before fire. If that night I had taken offense, tossed my phone aside, and gone to bed like a tired old man, the only thing waiting for me the next morning would have been my son's cold body chained inside a filthy shed belonging to his wife's family. But the truth is, it didn't start with that message. Just a few hours earlier, I had been the happiest man in this border country. Outside, the winter wind howled through the cracks of my old wooden ranch house. But inside the kitchen, my heart was warm, as if I were sitting right beside a fireplace. I was polishing my old cowhide boots, the ones I only wore on the most important occasions. On the table lay the gifts I had prepared with care. A bottle of bourbon I had aged myself for 5 years, a jar of peach preserves made from the fruit trees out back, and a wool scarf I had clumsily knitted for Lauren, my daughter-in-law, even though I knew she never cared for handmade things. 6 months ago, Matthew had come back to the ranch. He had wrapped an arm around my shoulders, his eyes shining with pride. "Old man," he said, smiling, "you're coming to the city this Christmas. I'll make you the best brisket you've ever tasted. We'll put up the biggest Christmas tree on the block." That promise carried me through half a year. Then my phone buzzed. I read the message 10 times. Old man. Matthew never called me that without warmth. He called me Dad or Chief or sometimes Old Man, but always with affection. More than that, Matthew hated sloppy writing. He cared about punctuation, about tone. This message was cold, mechanical, like it had been typed by someone who wanted to kick an old stray dog off a porch. I called him immediately. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. My heart began to race, not from anger but from fear. I called Lauren. It rang for a long time before she answered. "Hello? Dad, is that you?" It was her voice, but something was wrong. She was trembling, out of breath, like someone was standing just behind her. "Lauren, where's Matthew?" I asked quickly. "Why did he send me that message? I'm getting ready to head to the bus terminal." He's sleeping. "No, we're at the airport. We're flying to Miami for an emergency. It's loud here. Please don't come." Matthew is exhausted. He doesn't want to talk. She was lying. I knew it instantly. Behind her, I heard no airport announcements, no rolling suitcases, no crowd. What I heard was music, heavy bass booming through speakers. Gangster rap. The kind that glorifies crime and violence. The kind Matthew hated. The kind he had banned from his house. Between the beats, I heard a man laughing. Loud, rough, drunk. Hang Up a Voice barked in the background. "Tell that old man to get lost." The line went dead. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen gripping my phone until my knuckles turned white. Blood rushed to my head. A normal father might have sighed. He might have assumed plans changed. He might have put the gifts away and sat down alone. But I'm not a normal father. I've lived my whole life on hard land. I know danger the way other men know weather. I smell it before it arrives. Vacation tired. I murmured, staring into nothing. "No, I know where you are." I grabbed my suitcase, opened the drawer, and took out my folding knife with the oak handle. I'd carried it since my days as a lumberjack. The blade was worn, but sharp. sharp enough to cut rope, sharp enough to protect family. I slid it into the inside pocket of my thick jacket right over my heart. That night I left my house behind. I wasn't going to Christmas dinner. I was going to look for my son, because when a father's instincts start screaming, you don't ignore them. You run. The night bus smelled of diesel, old fabric, and exhaustion. I sat in the very last seat, hunched forward, my suitcase clutched between my knees like a shield. Outside the window, the road dissolved into darkness. Every now and then, the headlights cut through dry trees and empty fields, tearing shapes out of the black before swallowing them again. The wind howled across the plains, cold and sharp. But it was nothing compared to the storm growing inside my chest. They say that when a man gets old, his senses fade. His eyesight blurs, his hearing dulls, his hands slow down. That's true. I won't argue with it. But there is one thing that doesn't age. If anything, it grows sharper. A father's instinct. We call it a gut feeling. It's the same instinct that makes an old wolf sense a storm before the clouds arrive, or a horse tremble minutes before the earth shakes. And that night my gut wasn't whispering. It was screaming. Matthew is in danger. Run, William, run. I tightened my grip on the suitcase. Inside, the bottle of bourbon clinked softly against the jar of peach preserves. I slid my hand inside my jacket, touching the cold, familiar shape of the knife's oak handle. I had carried it for 40 years, from my days cutting timber to the long, lonely nights on the ranch. The blade was old, but it still knew its job. Cut rope, peel fruit, and if it came to it, protect family. I closed my eyes and remembered Matthew at 7 years old. There had been a storm that night, fierce enough to knock fences down. One of our cows got loose in the brush. I told Matthew we'd look for it in the morning, but he wouldn't hear of it. He cried and begged until I gave in. We walked for hours through rain and wind soaked to the bone. When we finally found the cow stuck in a ravine, Matthew threw himself forward, his small hands trying to lift a frightened animal twice his size. He was covered in mud, shivering, exhausted, but his eyes burned with determination. I won't abandon family, he told me that night, his teeth chattering. Never. A boy like that doesn't grow up to send his father a message telling him to die alone. No, that message was written by fear, or by someone who wanted me far away. Hey, boss. The bus driver called out suddenly, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. He was about Matthew's age, chewing gum loudly. You going to visit family for the holidays? You look like you're headed to a funeral. I forced a crooked smile. Yeah. My son said he has a surprise for me. Guess I'm just nervous. The driver laughed. City kids make good money these days, probably buying you a car or sending you on a cruise. I didn't answer. A trip to Miami. That's what the message said. But why the secrecy? Why Lauren's shaking voice? Why that music? That damn music followed me like a ghost. I bowed my head and prayed quietly. Lord, protect my boy. If he's safe, I'll take whatever years I have left and give them to you. But if someone lays a hand on him... I didn't finish the sentence. The bus rolled on, carrying an old man and a fear so heavy it felt like a stone crushing my ribs. We reached the city late on December 23rd. Lights covered the streets. Giant Christmas trees blinked in public squares. Church bells rang, announcing peace and joy. It all made me feel smaller. I took an old taxi to the suburbs, to the neighborhood where Matthew had bought his house 3 years earlier. It had been his greatest pride. He worked overtime night after night at the trucking company to afford that place. We're here, the driver said, slowing down. Nice area. I looked out the window. Yes, it was Matthew's street. Every house was dressed for Christmas. Reindeer made of lights, inflatable Santa Clauses waving cheerfully, garlands glowing behind windows, every house except one. Matthew's house stood dark and silent, cream-colored and cold. No lights, no wreath, curtains pulled tight as if whoever was inside wanted to hide something. But what made my blood turn cold wasn't the darkness, it was the trucks. Matthew's clean silver sedan was gone. In its place, 3 massive black pickup trucks sat in the yard. Dark-tinted windows, red mud caked along the sides, the kind of mud you only find on border dirt roads smugglers use. They crushed the grass Matthew spent every weekend tending. I paid the driver and stepped out into the cold. As soon as the door shut behind me, I heard it. Music. Loud. Violent. The same gangster rap. Trumpets screaming. Bass pounding. I stood at the iron gate, my breath turning white. This wasn't a vacation. This was an invasion. I moved closer, peering through a narrow gap in the living room curtains. Warm, yellow light spilled out. My heart pounded as I focused. Inside, sprawled across Matthew's leather sofa, sat his in-laws. Frank Sullivan, his face red, drinking Matthew's expensive whiskey straight from the bottle. Diane Sullivan, laughing loudly, cigarette ash falling onto the white rug Matthew vacuumed every Sunday. And then there was him, Rick Sullivan, Cyclops, bare arms, gold chain thick as a dog leash, a black scorpion tattoo crawling up his neck. His boots rested on Matthew's coffee table while he cleaned his fingernails with Matthew's fruit knife, laughing as if this house belonged to him. Matthew had shown me his picture once. "That guy's trouble, Dad," he said. "I banned him from my house." So what was he doing here? And more importantly, where was my son? I stepped back into the shadow of the oak tree, my mind racing. I needed confirmation. I needed to see Lauren. I straightened my jacket, adjusted my collar, and rang the doorbell. Once, twice. The music cut abruptly. Footsteps, whispers. "Who is it?" A rough voice barked. "Let me see," a woman said. The door opened a crack. Lauren appeared. She wore a thin silk nightgown, a sweater thrown over her shoulders. Heavy makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me standing there with a suitcase full of Christmas gifts, the color drained from her face. Her hands trembled as she gripped the door. "William," she whispered. I looked into her eyes, searching for warmth. There was none, only fear. I searched Lauren's eyes for something, anything. A flicker of relief, a hint of welcome, a trace of the woman who used to call me Dad with a shy smile. There was nothing, only raw, naked fear. "Hello, Lauren," I said quietly. "I'm here." Her lips trembled. She tightened her grip on the doorframe as if it were the only thing holding her upright. "Dad, why did you come? I told you we're not. You said Matthew was sleeping." I cut in my voice, low but firm. "So why is that music playing? Why are there 3 trucks in the yard, and why are your parents and your brother inside my son's house?" She flinched, like I'd struck her. Lauren glanced over her shoulder. Panic flashing across her face. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. That was when Cyclops stepped into the hallway. He had a beer in his hand, his face flushed with alcohol. He looked me up and down, slowly, deliberately, like a butcher sizing up meat. Then he grinned, teeth stained with smoke. "Who's this?" he asked, leaning close to Lauren. "Oh, the old rancher." He stepped forward until I could smell the liquor on his breath. "You got the wrong house, old man. Nobody's buying vegetables here. Get lost." My fists clenched. "I came to see my son," I said. "Move." Cyclops laughed and turned to Lauren. "Your son doesn't want to see him. He's sick of smelling cow manure." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. As she raised her arm, the sweater sleeve slipped back just enough for me to see the bruises on her wrist. Finger marks. Fresh. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Go. Matthew is fine. I swear. Tomorrow I'll have him call you. Just go." Something inside me snapped. "Where is my son?" I shouted, pushing the door. Lauren screamed. Cyclops slammed it shut in my face. The bolt slid into place. I stood there in the freezing night, staring at the wooden door that separated me from my child. Inside, Cyclops's laughter exploded again, louder than before. The music surged, drowning out the sound of my pounding fists. They thought a locked door would stop me. They were wrong. I stepped back, breathing hard. I looked up at the second-floor window, the bedroom Matthew shared with his wife. Dark. No movement. No light. I bent down, pretending to lift my suitcase, and walked toward the gate like a defeated old man. I didn't stop until the oak trees swallowed me in shadow. Then I threw the suitcase into the bushes. I kept only the knife. Pulling my hood low, I moved around the side of the house, sticking close to the stone wall. The backyard used to be Matthew's sanctuary. Every visit we trimmed the roses together, argued about grass length, laughed over small things. That night it looked like a war zone. Tire tracks tore through the lawn. The rose bushes were crushed, their stems snapped and buried in mud. The smell of gasoline hung in the air. These trucks hadn't come for a party. They had come to move something heavy. I moved quietly, joints screaming, but obeying like an old cat hunting in the dark. At the far corner of the yard stood the shed. Matthew built himself a simple pine structure meant to store tools. As I got closer, my heart sank. The flimsy wooden door had been reinforced with 2 iron bars. A new padlock hung there, massive and shiny in the moonlight. Why lock a tool shed like a prison? I pressed my ear against the wood. At first there was nothing. Then clink, metal against metal, chains. A faint sound followed, a broken, exhausted moan. Water. My knees nearly gave out. "Matthew," I whispered, my lips pressed to the wood. "Son, is that you?" Silence. Then, 3 seconds later, a soft knock came from inside. Knock, knock, and a sob. "Dad! Daddy!" The world tilted. My son wasn't in Miami. He wasn't asleep in a warm bed. He was chained in a filthy shed while strangers drank and laughed in his living room. Tears burned my eyes, but they dried instantly, replaced by something far worse. Fury. I studied the padlock, too strong for the knife. I scanned the ground and spotted a rusted iron bar, half buried beneath a bougainvillea bush. I gripped it, feeling its weight. Instead of attacking the lock, I wedged the bar between the latch and the rotten wood. I drew in every ounce of strength I had left. The wood cracked. The latch tore free. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The smell hit first urine blood antiseptic. I turned on my phone flashlight. Matthew lay curled on the dirt floor, half naked, his skin purple with cold. His hands were tied behind his back. A thick iron chain clamped his ankle to a bolt in the concrete. His leg was swollen, twisted at a sickening angle. I dropped to my knees. "My God, my boy." He lifted his head slowly. When he recognized me, terror filled his remaining good eye. "Dad," he rasped, "turn off the light. Run." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, covering him with my jacket. "They'll kill you," he whispered. "Cyclops has a gun. Then he'll have to go through me." Matthew shook as he spoke. He told me everything. The drugs hidden in his trucks, the wrench to the head, the broken leg, the message sent under threat. Lauren knew, he said, tears streaking his face. She watched, the betrayal cut deeper than any blade. "They're going to inject me," he whispered. "Make me an addict. Then no one will believe me." A sound echoed outside. Footsteps. A drunken voice hummed, "Merry Christmas, brother-in-law." Cyclops was coming. I turned off the flashlight and pressed myself into the darkness behind the door, iron bar in one hand, knife in the other. I was old. I was tired, but I was a father, and fathers don't hide when their children are about to be destroyed. The door creaked open. The fight began. The shed door creaked open. Cold moonlight spilled across the dirt floor, drawing a long, distorted shadow inside. The smell of alcohol came first, thick and sour, followed by the sound of heavy boots dragging across the ground. Cyclops stepped in. He didn't bother turning on the light. Maybe he liked the darkness. Maybe he liked the fear. A half-empty bottle dangled from his right hand. In his left, the black shape of a pistol caught the moonlight for a split second. "Well, well," he slurred, voice thick with drink. "Let's see how my brother-in-law is doing. Christmas gift time." Matthew whimpered behind me. "Please, Rick," he begged. "Don't, please." Cyclops laughed, lifting the bottle for another swig. "Don't call me Rick. Call me boss." That moment when he tipped his head back, throat exposed, gun hanging loose, was the only opening I was going to get. I didn't shout. Old men who've survived their lives don't shout when they attack. I stepped out of the darkness and swung the iron bar with everything I had. The impact cracked against his wrist with a dry, ugly sound. Cyclops screamed. The gun flew from his hand, skidding across the concrete into the shadows. He spun around, eyes wide with shock, staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. An old man, white hair, eyes burning. I didn't give him time. I swung again, aiming for his knee. He staggered back just enough that the bar only grazed his thigh. He roared, hurling the bottle at my face. I ducked. The bottle shattered against the wooden post glass, raining down like ice. Cyclops charged. He hit me with the full weight of his body, slamming me into stacked fertilizer bags. Pain exploded in my chest. The iron bar slipped from my hand. "You old piece of I'll kill you," he howled. His fist smashed into my cheekbone. Stars burst across my vision. Blood filled my mouth. He threw himself on top of me, his hands clamping around my throat. I couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to darkness and noise. His face hovered inches from mine, twisted in a drunken grin. He thought he'd won. Youth over age, strength over bones. He forgot one thing. I was raised on a ranch. I had slaughtered animals. I had faced charging bulls. I knew where to strike. My right hand slipped into my jacket pocket. Oak handle. Click. The knife opened. With the last strength I had, I drove the blade into his upper thigh right where flesh was soft and vital. He screamed, a sound so sharp it sliced the night in half. Blood erupted hot and wet, soaking my hands. He let go of my throat, instantly clutching his leg, eyes wide with terror. I shoved him off and rolled aside, coughing, gasping for air. Cyclops tried to stand. He reached blindly, searching for the gun. "Where is it?" he moaned. "Matthew," I shouted. The gun. My son dragged himself forward despite the chain biting into his ankle. With shaking hands, he grabbed the pistol and aimed it. "Freeze," Matthew rasped. "Don't move." Cyclops froze. His bravado drained out of him, leaving only fear. He raised his hands slowly, blood pouring between his fingers. "It was a joke," he whimpered. "Just a joke." I staggered to my feet, grabbed the iron bar, and brought it down on the back of his neck. He collapsed like a sack of meat. The shed went silent. I stood there panting, shaking, drenched in someone else's blood. Everything hurt, but I felt nothing except clarity. "It's over," I said. "We're leaving." There was no time to rest. Cyclops' scream would have carried to the house. I searched his pockets, fingers trembling, and found keys. A Ford logo dangled from the chain. I rushed back to Matthew. The chain was the problem. I didn't have the padlock key. "Dad?" "I can't move," Matthew whispered, eyes wide. I scanned the shed and spotted a rusty wrench. I dropped to my knees and attacked the shackle connecting the chain to the bolt. My hand slipped. Blood ran from my knuckles. "Hurry!" Matthew gasped. "They're coming." I forced the nut loose inch by inch until it finally gave. The chain came free from the floor. "Good enough," I said. "We'll deal with it later." I helped Matthew stand. He screamed as his broken leg touched the ground. "Lean on me," I ordered. We stumbled out of the shed. A bright light snapped on. Freeze Frank Sullivan stood on the back porch with a shotgun. Diane screamed behind him. Lauren covered her mouth, shaking. "He killed my brother," Diane shrieked. Frank fired. The blast hit the dirt at our feet, spraying mud. "Run," I shouted. We crashed through bushes toward the front yard. Another shot tore branches above us. I hit the truck keys and the middle pickup flashed its lights. I shoved Matthew into the passenger seat, slammed the door, and jumped behind the wheel. Frank ran into the driveway, aiming. I gunned the engine. The truck roared forward. Frank dove aside as I smashed through the iron gate metal, screaming. We tore down the street into the darkness. Matthew clutched his leg, pale and shaking. "Did we make it, Dad?" I stared at the road ahead. "Not yet," I said. "But tonight, we're still alive." The black pickup tore through the empty highway like a wounded animal refusing to die. The V8 engine roared, swallowing miles of cold asphalt under the headlights. I didn't dare slow down. My hands were locked to the steering wheel, knuckles stiff, eyes fixed on the road as if looking away for a second would invite death itself. In the passenger seat, Matthew was fading. His broken leg was stretched awkwardly across the dashboard, the iron chain still biting into his swollen ankle. With every bump, he flinched, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Blood darkened his torn shorts and smeared the leather seat beneath him. "Don't sleep," I said sharply, reaching over to tap his cheek. "Stay with me, son." "I'm cold," he whispered. "So tired." Fear tightened my chest. I knew the signs: shock, blood loss, pain pushing the body past its limits. If he closed his eyes now, his heart might follow. "Look at me," I ordered. "Do you remember when you fell out of the guava tree and broke your arm? You cried all night, then wanted to climb again the next morning." A faint smile tugged at his cracked lips. You yelled at me for tearing my new shirt." "That's right," I said. "And this time, if you make it, I'll buy you 10 new ones. Just don't close your eyes." The dashboard clock glowed red. 200 a.m. We were already miles away from that house, but distance meant nothing if they had friends everywhere. I needed a hospital, but not a big one. Not downtown. Too many cameras, too many connections. Then I remembered Oak Creek, a small clinic on the outskirts of town. Old, quiet, the kind of place people forgot existed. I turned off the highway onto a dirt road, dust exploding behind us. The truck rattled and Matthew groaned, gripping the seat. "Almost there," I said, though doubt gnawed at me. In this borderland, the line between good men and bad men was thin as paper. The Oak Creek Clinic appeared out of the darkness like a tired ghost. One story, peeling yellow paint, a flickering blue and white emergency light buzzing weakly above the entrance. I didn't even shut off the engine. I jumped out, ran to Matthew's side and hauled him into my arms. He weighed less than I remembered. Too light, like fear had already started eating him from the inside. A nurse behind the counter jolted awake when she saw us, an old man covered in blood and a younger man half conscious with a chain hanging from his leg. "Oh my God," she gasped. "My son was in an accident," I said, laying Matthew on the nearest gurney. "He needs help, now." A middle-aged doctor rushed out, glasses sliding down his nose. He examined the leg, the bruises, the chain. His expression shifted. "This isn't a traffic accident," he said slowly. "These injuries, they're intentional." "I rescued him," I snapped. "You can ask questions later. Fix his leg first." The doctor hesitated, then nodded to the nurse. "Treatment room, morphine. Call the police," I said, grabbing the nurse's wrist. "Not local police. Call federal." The doctor pulled her hand free. "Sir, this is protocol." They wheeled Matthew away. I collapsed into a plastic chair in the waiting room, my head in my hands. Cyclops's blood was still under my fingernails. My phone buzzed weakly, then went dark. Dead battery. Not even 20 minutes passed before sirens cut through the night. 2 police cars screeched to a halt outside. Too fast. 4 officers stepped in, hands hovering near their guns. The one in front was heavy-set, a thick mustache shadowing his mouth. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto me. "William Carter?" he asked. "Yes," I said, standing. "I need to report." "Shut up," he snapped. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, assault, and disturbing the peace." The words hit harder than any punch. What I said. "You're insane. My son was tortured, chained, his wife's family." The officer leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. "The Sullivan family already called us. Cyclops is a friend of mine. You picked the wrong fight, old man." Cold flooded my veins. Before I could react, 2 younger officers lunged at me. I wasn't a criminal, but I wasn't a lamb either. I grabbed the plastic chair and swung. It cracked against one officer's shoulder. I ran. "Matthew!" I shouted, bursting into the treatment room. "Barricade the door!" The doctor and nurse screamed as I slammed the door shut and slid the bolt just as a hand reached through. "Open up!" The mustached officer yelled, pounding the door. Inside, Matthew stirred, drugged but conscious. His eyes widened with fear. "The police," he whispered. "They're not here to help," I said, dragging a heavy cabinet against the door. "They're here to finish the job." The blows grew harder. Plaster fell from the ceiling. I looked around. No windows without bars. No exits. A trap. I turned to the nurse, who stood frozen, tears streaking her face. "Please," I said, forcing my voice steady, "lend me your phone. They want to kill my son." She hesitated, then pulled it from her pocket with shaking hands. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years but knew by heart. It rang once. "David," I said when the line connected. "It's William." Silence for half a second. Then his voice hardened. "Master, what's happening? Oak Creek Clinic. Local police are compromised. My son was tortured by narcos. We're trapped," Barricade David said instantly. "Do not open that door. I'm deploying a federal rapid response team. 30 minutes. I don't know if the door will hold," I said. "Make it hold," he replied. "I'm coming." The line went dead. I turned back to Matthew. His eyes were clearer now, determined. "Dad," he said weakly, "if they get in, our word won't mean anything." I nodded. "We just need time," I said. Outside, a voice boomed through a megaphone. "You have 3 minutes to surrender." I tightened my grip on the knife. 3 minutes. For men like them, that was more than enough time to erase the truth. 3 minutes. For men who live off fear and silence, 3 minutes is an eternity. The pounding on the door grew heavier. Wood groaned. The cabinet I'd dragged in front of it rattled with every blow. Somewhere outside, metal scraped against metal. They were preparing something stronger. Matthew pushed himself up on the bed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morphine. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes were sharp. "Dad," he said hoarsely, "if they take us, it's over. Their word against ours. We disappear." I looked at him, my son chained hours ago like an animal, now thinking clearer than men with guns and badges. "You're right," I said, "so we make sure the world hears us." He swallowed, then pointed weakly to his left foot, the one without the cast. The sneaker was still on, caked with dirt and blood. "Take off my shoe," he said. I frowned, but I did it quickly, tugging the laces loose. The shoe came off heavy soaked. Lift the insole. I slid my fingers underneath. The foam peeled back, and there it was, a tiny black square tucked into a shallow cut in the heel. An SD card. I stared at it, my heart skipping. What is this? My body cam, Matthew said. The day I caught them in the warehouse, I pulled the card before Frank hit me, hid it in my shoe. Outside, the megaphone crackled again. Final warning. I clenched the card in my palm. What's on it? Everything he said. Drugs, money, voices, and Frank hitting me from behind. The door shook violently. Plaster rained down. Someone shouted orders. I turned to the nurse, her back pressed to the wall, hands over her mouth. Your phone, I said. Does it have social media? She nodded, terrified. Yes. Open it, I said. Go live. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the screen. The front camera lit up. Framing my face, blood-smeared hair, wild eyes burning. It's live, she whispered. I took a breath and looked straight into the lens. My name is William Carter, I said calmly. I'm a father. I stepped aside so the camera could see Matthew on the bed, his leg grotesquely swollen, the iron chain still biting into his ankle. This is my son, I continued. He was beaten, chained, and tortured by his wife's family because he discovered they were trafficking drugs through his trucking company. I held the SD card up to the camera, and this contains the proof, video, audio, everything. A crash echoed as something slammed against the door. Cracks spidered through the wood. And do you know what's happening right now? I asked the camera. The local police are trying to arrest me instead of the criminals. They're outside threatening to kill us to keep this quiet. I could hear shouting now. Angry. Panicked. Share this, I said, my voice steady. If we don't walk out alive, let the world know who did this. The door burst inward slightly as a tear gas canister rolled across the floor, spewing white smoke. My eyes burned. My throat closed. Upload it, I shouted to the nurse. Now, she hit the button. The screen flashed. Published. The cabinet flew backward as the door finally gave way. 4 officers stormed in, wearing gas masks, batons, raised weapons drawn. One swung, striking my shoulder. Pain ripped through me. Another fired a taser. Electricity locked my muscles, dropping me to the floor. Through the smoke and ringing in my ears, I saw the nurse's phone glowing on the ground. The video was live. I smiled. Boots surrounded me. The mustached officer loomed above, baton raised. I told you, he snarled. I am the law here. I closed my eyes. Then, boom. Not a gunshot. An explosion of sound as the front doors of the clinic shattered. Heavy footsteps thundered in. Sharp voices cut through the chaos. Federal police, drop your weapons now. The baton froze midair. I forced my eyes open. Through the smoke, black uniforms poured into the room. Rifles raised red laser dots dancing across chests. At their center stood a tall man, calm as stone. David. He walked forward, eyes locked on the mustached officer. You're done, he said. On your knees. The baton clattered to the floor. Hands went up. One by one, the corrupt officers were cuffed, disarmed, dragged away. David knelt beside me, pulling off his mask. Master, he said quietly. You held on. Barely, I rasped. Matthew, I've got him. David said, signaling a medic. He'll live. Relief crashed over me so hard my legs gave out. Later, as dawn crept in, they moved us to a military hospital under guard. Matthew was taken straight to surgery. Pins, plates. The doctor said he would walk again, but he would limp. He smiled when I told him. Better to limp than kneel. The fallout came fast. The video exploded online. Millions of views overnight. Hashtags, outrage, pressure from everywhere. By sunrise, federal warrants were signed. The Sullivan house was raided at dawn. Drugs, weapons, cash. Cyclops was found bleeding and unconscious. Frank and Diane tried to burn documents in the fireplace. Lauren didn't run. She sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking, eyes empty. At the trial, months later, the courtroom overflowed. When the SD card footage played, the room went silent. Frank was sentenced to 25 years, Cyclops to 30, Diane to 15. Justice, slow and imperfect, finally showed its face. Afterward, Lauren asked to see Matthew. I waited outside. I forgive you, Matthew told her calmly, but forgiveness doesn't mean staying. She broke down. 3 months later, back at the ranch, a fire burned bright under the stars. Matthew stood by the grill with a crutch turning meat slowly. "You were right, old man," he said, smiling. "Best brisket ever." I raised my glass to being alive. The fire crackled, and for the first time in a long time, the night felt warm. The ranch was quiet again. Winter had passed, but in the mountains the nights were still cold. A large fire burned in the open yards, sparks rising into the dark sky like restless fireflies. The smell of oak smoke and slow-roasted brisket filled the air, thick and comforting. Matthew stood by the grill, one hand gripping a crutch, the other turning the meat with steady patience. His leg was healing metal pins hidden beneath skin and scars. He walked with a limp now, but he stood tall. "I told you I'd make it," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Might be late, but a promise is a promise." I smiled and handed him a plate. "Smells better than any five-star restaurant." David sat across from us, nursing a glass of bourbon. He'd driven out from the city without telling anyone. Just showed up like old times. No uniform, no authority. Just a man who remembered where he came from. "To being alive," he said, raising his glass. "To justice," Matthew added. I lifted mine last. "To family." The whiskey burned in a good way, warmed the chest, calmed the bones. For a while we ate in silence, listening to the fire crackle. I watched my son chew, laugh, argue with David about seasoning. I watched him live. If I had ignored that first instinct, if I had believed the lie, if I had chosen comfort over fear, I would be sitting here alone now, staring at a photograph, asking myself where I went wrong. Matthew caught me looking. What he asked, nothing I said, just thinking how close I came to losing you. He nodded slowly. "Me too." After the trial, Lauren had asked to see him one last time. 5 minutes, guards in the room, hands cuffed. I stayed outside. Matthew told me later what he said. "I forgive you," he told her. "Because holding on to hate only poisons the one who drinks it. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning. You watched while they broke my leg. You stayed silent while they destroyed me. I need someone who stands beside me in the storm, not someone who hides behind it." She cried. He turned away. That was the end. Forgiveness given, trust not returned. Some lessons are permanent. As the fire burned lower, Matthew leaned back, stretching carefully. "You know, Dad," he said, "I used to think strength meant never getting hurt." I looked at him. And now I know it means getting hurt and still standing up. I nodded. "That's something your mother always understood." The wind shifted, carrying sparks into the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. I looked into the flames and thought about that night, about the locked door, the shed, the chain, the knife in my pocket, the moment when fear tried to tell me to turn back. Fear is convincing. It speaks softly. It sounds like reason. It tells you you're old, that it's not your place anymore, that other people's lives are no longer your responsibility. Fear lies. I turn toward you now the way I wish someone had turned toward me years ago. If you're listening to this as a parent, remember one thing. They can take your money, they can take your house, they can take your name, but they can never take the blood that runs through your family. When your gut tells you something is wrong, listen. When the voice inside says your child is in danger, don't negotiate with fear. Don't wait for permission. Don't hope someone else will act. Kick down the door if you have to. Fight in silence. Because a man's greatest wealth isn't what he leaves behind in a bank account. It's who's still sitting beside the fire when the night grows cold. Matthew handed me a thick slice of brisket, smoke still rising. "Here," he said. "This one's for you." I took a bite. Juicy. Perfect. "Best you've ever made," I said. He grinned. "Merry Christmas, Dad. Merry Christmas, son." The fire cracked softly, lighting our faces in gold. And for the first time in a long time, the night didn't feel dangerous anymore. It felt earned.